What's everybody going on? And welcome to the block presented by Around the Sports Block Network. Let's get into it right away, everybody. Welcomed on by Sam and Shane. Got a really good episode. How you guys doing so far?
Doing great. Excited for this week.
Yep, it's
Yeah,
gonna be a good one. Go ahead, Shane. Go ahead.
no, it's gonna be an interesting episode with all of us kind of.
I know because we've got baseball back too. It's
Yeah, we
coming
do.
later in the
We
show, but
do.
we
We do.
finally have it back. I'm excited
Yes.
about it. Get to hear your
hmm
intakes about what's been going on because we're coming toward the end of it.
Yep.
But as always, we're going to start off with a little bit of hockey as we usually do. And we got some interesting topics to talk about. So let's get it going, Sam. You lead us.
Yeah, so the NHL released their lists of the top players in each position going forward the next 3 years. They released the top defensemen, top centers, and top wingers that they project in 3 years are going to be the best in the league. Obviously, the list includes a few good players. We'll start with defensemen. The list here includes Cale Makar, Moritz Seider, Miro Heiskanen, and Owen Power. Those are their four that they've pegged as they're going to be into the discussion for the next great defenseman in 3 years from now. So, guys, what do you think of this list? Is there anyone that stands out to you? Anyone that you feel excluded?
Well, I'll tell you right off the bat, obviously Cale Makar is the ultimate defenseman in this game and will be for probably the next 6 years. You just look at his offensive skills and his defensive skills, and for the size of a player that he is, he does it phenomenally. So I think at the end of the day, he's going to be the front runner to be the best defenseman for the next upcoming 3 years. But we're here to talk about the other ones too that are going to be the top of the top. I do see the one guy that I'm pretty familiar with to the right of your screen, and that's Owen Power. Obviously, got a couple NHL games in last season and did great for being a young kid. But ultimately, it's going to take him a little bit to get used to an 82 game season and really work his way into becoming a dominant NHL defenseman. But I will mention there is one guy not on this list that I think will absolutely explode because Owen Power is now going to be in the league, and that's Rasmus Dahlin. Got to remember, guys, he was the first overall pick literally in 2018, so not too long ago. And he's just been on some really bad teams as of recent, and he's been pulling his own. So I really think he's going to bloom this upcoming season, having Owen Power maybe beside him or potentially being the second pair guy. He won't be taking that much more ice time, and a lot of weight will be off his shoulders. You look at his campaign from last season, he got Darling got to 80 games. He had 53 points. I expect that to go up tremendously. Also, with how much better the Buffalo Sabres are going to be this upcoming season. But overall, I mean, 160 points already in 277 career games. Not too bad for the young kid who's only 22 years old. So I expect nothing but great things for him coming up for the next 3 seasons.
Yeah, the Sabres defensemen, both of them, both Power and Sandin, have exactly what you want in a top pairing defenseman, that being the size and the skating ability, the mobility, and the ability to put up points. And all three of them have shown that they have those. The question I think remains is what separates an elite defenseman from just a pretty good defenseman is the ability to defend. And these guys obviously are not seasoned. This thing comes with time. And I think that's going to be the jump for them going forward. That's what you want them to focus on going forward.
I agree with that statement 100%. I just think it's finally time for a guy like Darlene, who's been literally the most important player in that Sabres locker room, to start developing and develop fast. Ultimately, he's been through a lot of head coaches, like I said earlier, too. But at the end of the day, I think when you get some confidence and more of that media attention to a younger guy in Owen Power, it's going to get Darlene to relax a little bit, and he's going to tighten up on his defense, especially with Don Granato back again as their head coach. So I really like this group going forward, and I think they'll get a little bit better defensively. We know the offensive skill is there.
I think Makar is obviously kind of the easy answer to this. You guys mentioned already a guy that's already averaging over a point per game at this point in his career as a defenseman, which is huge for your offense because obviously they're defensemen, they need to be able to defend. But if you can also add, 80 plus points on top of that in an 80 game season or try to get to that point, that's going to make a huge difference for the entire team and not just on the defensive side of things. And I think Power, you want him to kind of take the same route that Makar did, where he got a taste of the NHL early on. He looks like he belonged, and then you hope he blossoms into a full-time player in his second season moving forward as well.
Yeah, you guys mentioned it. It's Oh, it's definitely Kale McCarr's position to lose, right?
Hmm.
All these guys are fantastic. These guys have very few holes to this game, but Kale McCarr is Superman, right? If you put him at forward, he would be an
Hmm.
elite forward.
Right.
There's not a lot of defensemen, I think, in the history of this game with his offensive skill, and he's just really, really amazing to watch. And he's also reliable defensively. So it's not just that he's great defensively and he's great offensively. He's great defensively, and he's way better than we've seen offensively, I think, in the last decade in this league. So it's
Yeah,
Caleb.
let's be real too. I mean, literally, he reminds me of basically making your own player in NHL, like Richel, whatever it is you want to call it, and like making it 99 overall for every setting. But he still stays like the same size, though. It's not like a
Hmm.
big guy. He's just a little tiny like twig out there, but he gets the job done. So
It's crazy.
it's fun and it's great to see for hockey because of how much it's changed over the past decade. You don't need those big beefy guys anymore. It really
Yeah.
is about the speed and just the intelligence of the game, and that's what Cale Makar brings to the table every night. He goes out and laces up the skates.
Yeah, as Kale McCarr, as hockey itself becomes more positionless, Kale McCarr is the kind of guy that's going to become more and more common, hopefully.
I will say we aren't sleeping on Darlene. You might be a little late to the show, but yeah, I kind of have him up there coming up in the end here.
Yeah.
But like you guys said, it's Makar's show for the next 3 to 8 years. Let's be
One
honest.
guy I do want to mention that is not on this list, and I don't really know why. I don't think there's any reason he shouldn't be in this conversation, is Charlie McAvoy of Boston.
Mm.
Charlie McAvoy, I think, of all these defensemen, is the best defensively and has just as much offensive upside as any of these guys, I think, to be the best defenseman. Maybe not numbers wise, but impact on the game wise, he should be in this conversation.
Oh, he's the definition of grit in the NHL.
I love it.
He's still kind of got that rustiness in the sense of playing old school hockey a little bit. Like you said, not really that flashy offensively consistently, but at the end of the day, I mean, this is the guy you want relying on for the next 8 years in your locker room. Just knowing if you have some uncertainty at your goaltending position or even your wingers, they're not able to come back on defensive rushes to make a stop. If you got Charlie McAvoy back there, you're going to be fine.
Absolutely. Just a great guy that helps you win. So let's move on to centers now. The NHL in their article focused on 5 centers, the 3 you see on the screen here: Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, Nathan MacKinnon, and then also mentioned Jack Hughes and Alexander Barkov. As a Panthers fan, getting Barkov a mention is great. I agree. But I think the conversation should focus on the 3 guys on the screen here. I mean,
Yeah, and
yeah,
we were talking about this a little bit before we started the show about Jack Hughes being on the list. I just don't see him really taking over the game like these guys have, especially this early in his career. Jack Hughes is going to be a great player in this league and he'll be successful, but I don't think he's going to be able to take over the game for the next couple of years, especially the next 3 years, if that's the timeline we're looking at. You look at Connor McDavid, obviously he's the face of hockey, and he is going to be what our younger generation's Sidney Crosby is, or our older generation. And it's going to be like that for years to come. Austin Matthews, no matter where he goes, he's just going to be scoring just like Ovechkin was watching him growing up. And then you've got Nathan MacKinnon, who I think is the better overall center if you look at it. Because if you look at Connor McDavid, if you look at Austin Matthews, to me, it seems like they get a little bit more like cute with their decision making, where Nathan MacKinnon is just like, nah, I'm making one move and it's going to happen and it's going to be successful. And that's the type of grittiness I love coming from a player like him. So I can't see these guys falling out of the top 3.
shit. Any last?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the issue, right? Is like you brought up Hughes, and like it's not that he isn't going to be able to become a great player. It's that, especially at center in the NHL right now, these 3 are the standard, right? And it doesn't feel like the next 3 years anything is going to really change there. I mean, Matthews obviously have a guy that scores 60 goals. There's going to be probably some regression there to some degree. It's going to be hard for anyone to keep that pace up other than guys we've seen in the past. It's kind of hard to expect him to do that. But even then, he's a 40-plus goal guy consistently, I feel like, for the next however long. And it's just going to be hard to beat that out, especially like McDavid's going to be the guy, period. We know that. I mean, you already said it. He is this generation's Sidney Crosby. As someone who's a Pittsburgh fan, I know what that means, and I totally understand it. it's just gonna be hard to get into that top 3 or 4 conversation anytime in the next couple of years.
Yeah, these three guys, I think the conversation starts and ends with them.
Mhm.
Aiden brought up an interesting point about Connor Bedard in a few years. I mean, that's a wait and see. I don't want to bet on any prospects.
Young players, hard to it's hard to say.
It's hard to bet on 18-year-olds, even though he has all the skill in the world. But of these three guys, I think who stands out to me is Austin Matthews because he's such a goal-centric type of player. McKinnon and McDavid are playmakers first, and they
Yeah.
need other players to help finish those chances. Austin Matthews is the exception to that. He scores goals at a better rate than anyone in this league. He's the next Mo Ovechkin, like we said. And I think as a centerman, to have that is so rare. I think it's just the most game-breaking aspect that any single forward can have is just the ability to, one, control the puck at all times and then score from anywhere. So to me, Austin Matthews is the answer. And I think looking forward that 2 years from now, he's going to be a free agent. That might change the NHL as we know it.
Yeah.
He's going to be an Arizona Coyote, let's be real, guys. And he's still going to be at the top of this list here without a doubt. I mean, he's just an absolute baller. And like you said, he may be just a goal scorer mainly in his game, but that's what you want. That's what you need. And it seems like any place he goes, it will be a successful route for him. So I'm not too worried, especially if he becomes an Arizona Coyote, which I'm hoping for. I think everybody wants it to happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Guys like him that don't need to be created for, that's definitely a huge thing. Because if you don't have to rely on the guys around him to make him a great goal scorer, it just makes things a lot easier for everyone else, even if he is the same playmaker. So
Goals are just so valuable. It makes as much sense as anything. All right, so our last thing, we have the wingers. The wingers, I think, is an interesting conversation because of the guys they listed in this article, I think there's some pretty obvious omissions, right? So I'm going to go through it right now. They check Kirill Kaprizov from Minnesota. They have Philip Forsberg, Kyle Connor, Jason Robertson, and Alex DeBrincat. Of those 5 guys, those are all great players, but those are not, except maybe for Kaprizov, I don't think those are the top wingers going forward. I think
to me, it's so hard to judge because you have to look at who's going to be centering these guys. I mean, let's be real. If you're a winger, your obvious position, unless you're an elite talent, is to capitalize on the, obviously whatever the center is going to try and set up for you. So for me, it's so hard. I mean, like, also, how can you not have like a guy like Patrick Kane on this list? Even though he's older, he still produces at such a high level. And even I think he will over the next 3 years easily. If you're looking for the younger guys, and let's be real, Philip Forsberg is far from young.
no, he's not.
nah.
He should not even be on this list, in my opinion. Not giving him disrespect, but I'm just saying, compared to the entire league, I think there's so many guys that play with, maybe a Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews that are just way better wingers statistically, just because of the scenario that they're put into. So this one's so hard to judge, and I really do scratch my head half the time. I mean, if you're gonna pick somebody though, just off their raw talent going forward, I like Alex DeBrincat. I do like the size in him, and I think he really has an opportunity to make something of himself in the sense of being moved on to a different organization. And he's really going to have his year to make a case of, yes, I can be an elite center in this league. And I think I've seen it enough from the past couple of years in this game. Hopefully he continues that going forward.
Well, I think DeBrincat has a good chance to make a step this year because this is a new system for him. This is a new situation. He's not playing behind Patrick Kane anymore. He'll be a first-line winger. So that's an interesting opportunity. To your Philip Forsberg case, I mean, this is the first year he cracked point per game.
Yeah.
84 points this year. He's a great player. He's not going to be the best winger in the NHL 3 years from now. He's, 28 now? This was a contract year. This is a step up.
I mean, if we're doing statistics, just pick anybody who's going to play with McDavid for 75% of the season.
But
statistically, yeah. I like what Kyle Connor did. I mean, he put up 93 points for the Jets, but it's the first time he had over, I think, 30 goals, right? He's had consistently like 25, 30. I can't remember if he did crack 30 before, but he going up to 47 is interesting because if he can keep up something even within like 10 of that consistently, that's going to put him up there. But I don't know if that's going to hold with the Jets or not. So
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Connor's great. I love Kyle Connor's offensive skill. He's as talented as anyone in this league, but I do think the production is somewhat is able to be maintained. I think that that system, I don't see a reason why he'll deplete or regress to the mean. But there's one guy I think that is not on this list that plays with an elite center and has a great defensive game and scores goals on his own, and that's Matthew Tkachuk. At 24 years old, coming into the Florida system, playing with Alexander Barkov, there's no reason why Matthew Tkachuk can't be the best winger in this league.
I agree 100% because if you look at this guy's feistiness too, he's got the attitude to be an elite, talent for years to come. And especially now going down to a really successful, I mean, not that he was not at a successful hockey club, but he's going to he literally got traded to bring in a new culture and attitude to a somewhat, I would say that the Panthers, if you looked at them last year, yes, skilled guys, but they needed a little feistiness. And having that characteristic at that young of an age and, producing the amount of points that he did, I believe it was 114 points, 112 points, something like that this past season. It's remarkable from a winger. So I love Matthew Tkachuk, and I would definitely throw him on this list because I think he will thrive down in Florida, and I think nothing but greatness for him to come. So I definitely agree with you.
Yeah. Other names that aren't here, Mitch Marner, I think, should have gotten a mention.
I think it's going to be interesting, though, if Matthews leaves.
Yes.
That might change his outlook. Yeah.
I need to see that guy play with somebody else and be productive. I need to.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so I think with that, we can wrap up that discussion and move on to our next topic, that being our favorite under-the-radar free agent signings. Obviously, the big names we all know about, like Vincent Trocheck to the Rangers, Nazem Kadri just signing with the Flames, guys like that. But I think with free agency especially, the guys that slip through the cracks often end up being the most valuable to their team because they're on such cheap deals. So I'm going to start with you, Matt. Who do you think is your favorite free agent signing?
Well, as we were doing the show, I thought of another one. So I got two for you guys coming up here. But I'm going to start off with the original one that I have, and that's Eric Comrie. Coming from the Winnipeg Jets, that organization, he's obviously seen some success, or at least a lot better than what Buffalo, where he is now, has been doing for the past 11 years. But that being said, Buffalo's had such a huge goaltender problem. And when you look at Eric and his game, he is so solid and he's calm. Yes, he may get some people may get the best of him from game to game, but he just needs more playing time. He needs to be able to be in a situation where he is the guy and he's got that trust from an organization. So he will most likely be the starting goaltender this year for the Buffalo Sabres. And what does that mean? Usually 40 to 45 games a season. But the best thing about this is the fact that they have Craig Anderson still as their backup goaltender. And he and Eric is going to be able to learn so much from that NHL vet who has seen so much, not only in the game, but just in life. These two will be able to have a great relationship and literally talk about anything. You know how they talk about quarterbacks in the NFL, the starter and the backup, they're literally best friends because that's all they do is they hang out, watch film together. These are the quarterbacks in the NHL, goaltenders. So I think Comrie is going to have a really good opportunity. Not going to say he's going to be elite or anything by any means, but he's going to have a great opportunity to really take his game to another level in the sense of just getting more playing time. And I'm really excited about that. The other one I'll mention real quick, Phil Kessel, guys, getting signed to Las Vegas. I mean, I was so excited when I heard this because Phil the Thrill walking down the strip when he's not playing a game, it's probably the best thing you could see in America. He'll probably be slugging like a glizzy down or
get him his hot dogs
here and there. But dude, I mean, honestly, besides the whole characteristic part of it, I just love how he's an older guy, but he still produces on good teams. So I think this is a great signing for Vegas, who really has been flipping their team this offseason, getting rid of some key pieces, but also bringing in some key pieces. I think it'll be a good fit. Kessel, I mean, he's a classic NHL vet. He knows what's expected. He's won 2 cups. I think it's a good signing for him.
Yeah, Comrie's definitely an underrated goaltender. I think he hasn't had much opportunity behind Hellebuck in Winnipeg. He was the 3rd goaltender in Florida. I mean, there just wasn't a lot of opportunities for him. And with Phil Kessel, I mean, he was in Arizona, right? His regression, you can't really count it almost because it's Arizona. That's where careers go to die. So
I agree until Matthews gets there.
until Austin Matthews changes that.
I will ship that until it happens, and I know.
Yeah.
It.
So in Bruce Cassidy's system, who knows what Phil? He could return to being a 30 goal scorer. He really could.
And that's the thing. For his age, it really is just you really never know. But you won't be surprised if he does excel. Even if he's on the bottom 2 lines, guys, which I'm pretty sure he will be. He's going to thrive. This team has got so much talent in the sense of not messing up. They really don't have players that are just that bad that really bring them down under. So having a classy vet like Phil the Thrill, it's going to make them just that much better. Oh, might have lost you guys. We there?
Good, Sam.
I think he's frozen.
Okay, Sam.
Shane, you got anything for us on the underrated signings this offseason?
Yeah, for Dallas, Mason Marchment. I really think that they especially needed somebody to come in and had a really good season for Panthers last year as kind of a complimentary player. With the guys that they have kind of underperforming, especially Seguin, which we'll talk about later, they needed somebody who can come in and try to help center, especially Pavelski can't be having so much pressure on him at 38 years old. He was honestly really good last year overall, especially for guys in his late 30s, but they need to take some pressure off of him, and I think having him as a second line center most likely would be very helpful for them.
Talking about Marchment?
Yes.
Okay, so what I love about this Marchment signing is he brings so much untapped potential. To Dallas, just because I think in Florida this is his breakout year, and it's going to be interesting for him to have to change systems because obviously that Florida system was great for his offensive output. Yeah. But this will be also a great opportunity for him to get significant ice time because he was a 3rd line guy in Florida with as much offensive talent as they had. So for him, I think he's going to be tasked with a lot more. It's just a matter of can he deliver with that.
Yeah, and they need him too for sure with the guys they have there. Unless everyone has a resurgent season for them, which it's hard to bank on that. I'll talk about one of those guys a little bit later, but they really need him to provide offense in the second unit, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the theme with these under the radar signings very commonly is that they're all forwards, right? Because forwards are increasingly common. There's just so much offensive talent in this league now that these guys fall through the cracks all the time. Defensemen, it's not so similar to that. It's a completely different story. There's just so few good defensemen, reliable defensemen, I think, that finding one for cheap and who's effective is so increasingly rare. But I think Edmonton was able to do that with Brett Kulak. He doesn't put up a lot of numbers. He's not very flashy, but he's so reliable. And they got him $2.5 million AAV for 4 years. Pretty great value, I think, for that kind of guy who's just consistently reliable. And I think for Edmonton, paying Darnell Nurse as much as they do to not be a good defenseman, it's crucial that they get a guy like Brett Kulak for $2.5 million to be a good defenseman and to anchor an offensive attack that includes Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're going to have a cup contending team each and every year, you're going to attract some serious players when it comes to free agency, and they'll take less money to come play for you. And like you said, he's not the most flashy player by any means, but he's almost like what we were talking about in Charlie McAvoy, where he's just reliable. He's consistent. So it's a great signing. I like the attitude he brings to the locker room, especially when he's on the ice. And I don't have anything against this one here. I think it's a solid move for them. And, I totally agree with you when you say that free agency under the radar, it is all forwards. Let's be real. Besides a couple here and there, like I'm saying with Eric, getting his opportunity in Buffalo. But it's so hard because you have to pick your poison in the sense of bringing in a player and when you're doing it in your rebuild or where your team is already at. Obviously you can sign a guy for cheap money and it's probably not going to make a difference if the rest of your team sucks. So, at the end of the day, it's really important to go through these. And I think we've come up with a pretty good list. So I'm with it all the way.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts before we move on?
Talked about flash. The Oilers need less flash at this point. They need more substance.
Absolutely.
I think that's the biggest takeaway with that is like, yeah, it's not a big signing technically in terms of obviously money, or no one's really going to look at it too heavily, but they need more players like that. They have enough guys who are, flashy and do all this crazy stuff. It hasn't gotten them where they need to go. So,
yeah, absolutely. This is the kind of moves that cup contenders make.
Yeah.
All right. So our last segment of the day, we're going to discuss the worst contracts that are currently being played out in the NHL. Obviously, we go through the same guys every year, but I think this year there's some really, really interesting new additions, and I'm excited to discuss this with you guys. So we have a list, and we're just gonna pick one from this list that stands out to us that we think is probably the worst one. So I'll start with you, Matt. Who is your worst NHL contract?
Okay, so for me, it's kind of the direction the organization is going, along with the player and the talent they still have, or maybe aren't giving all the way. And that's going to be Erik Karlsson for me, guys. Just for where the Sharks are heading, it doesn't make sense to me. It's so hard to get rid of a contract like this too, especially now that he's an older player. You can remember he's 32 years old right now. Last season, only played 50 games, had 35 points, which is good in that 50 game span. But if you're trying to make a drastic change and become a solid playoff hunt team, you're going to need him for 80 games. And I just don't think they have the talent through their roster to have this type of player anymore. Obviously, back in the day, they needed him 100% to make a run, weren't able to crack through. I think he's a great guy. He's a great leader. But at the end of the day, as of right now, it makes no sense whatsoever to have this contract in the books in San Jose.
The Erik Karlsson contract is a travesty towards the sport. It is such a shame that this didn't work out, I think, because you look at his time in Ottawa, you see him, he was the premier offensive defenseman. I mean, he inspired guys like Quinn Hughes and all these guys who are just these beautiful power play quarterbacks that engineer such great offenses from the points. And he goes to San Jose, gets the biggest contract at the time for a defenseman, $11.5 million annually, and takes a dump. I mean, it is really a shame, I think, because he was such a great offensive talent and maybe a little bit overrated defensively, I think, at times. He doesn't even have the same offensive talent anymore. It reminds me of a guy like Keith Yandel, I think, in Florida, who was great offensively, and then as the years go on, it just doesn't have the same offense, and his defense is not even to the point where it's NHL caliber, and his offense can't make up for it. So I think it's a great pick as in terms of worst contract, just because of that number value. I mean, $11.5 million a year handcuffs you so badly.
I agree 100%, man. It's a hard one to break down and really accept at this point, but there's so many on this list. I mean, seriously, look at some of these other guys. I think personally, some of them have the opportunity to get back that respect for the contract that they have, or are in the process of it too. I mean, obviously, I'm very familiar with Jeff Skinner, and everybody looks at his contract too, and they go $9 million a year. Are you kidding me? But if you look at last season, you're like, you know what? For what the Sabres are, yeah, it kind of makes sense. Went back and had 63 points in 80 games, almost a full NHL season. And you got to remember, the year that he got the contract, before he got the contract, he was at 82 games played, and he had 63 points once again. The 2 years in between where he had 23 and 14 points, guys, that was like COVID year, terrible coaching, Eichel drama, whatever it is, it's over now. So he's redeemed himself. And I think other guys have the possibility to do that. A guy like Tyler Seguin, even though he's ranked 1 here, I mean, obviously, it all comes down to him. His contract as of right now for what he's done, terrible, but he still is pretty young. He's got an opportunity to change it, but it has to be drastic and it has to be now.
Shane, who's your
It's,
pick?
it's funny you mention Sagan. He's the guy for me, I think, right now. And it's mostly because you look at 2020, 2021 season, obviously misses pretty much the entire year. So that's kind of, you can live with that. It's something that happens, injuries happen, whatever. But that was coming off already kind of a down season for him. And then he comes back, plays 81 games, and doesn't even crack 50 points. And he's a guy making almost $10 million a year on a veteran team that's trying to win, obviously. It's just hard to swallow. And yeah, he could turn it around. Obviously, he's been a great player in the past. That's why he's on this contract. But to score less than 100 points over your last two full healthy seasons, making this much money as a center, like, it's just hard to look at. And I think that that's why his contract is all the way up there, because at least with Carlson, like, he is a defenseman that does bring offensive value. There's value in that. Like, but he was scoring at a higher rate than Seguin was last year. Like, it's hard to look at that and go, yeah, that's a contract that you can live with. And it's not going anywhere. He's going to be on this contract until I think the 2026, 27 season, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
And it's going to be so hard if they do decide they have to move it. It's going to be so hard to do it if he's not at least somewhat better than he is right now.
Yeah, Sagan, I think, is one of the most interesting cases in the league because 3 short years ago, or 3 condensed years ago, there was no way we would have think that he would be on this list, right? I mean, he was a bona fide first-line center, and it was one of the better ones, a top 10 NHL center for sure. And he had a bad injury, and it just vanishes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I guess it's a example of just the fickle nature of this sports.
Yeah. I do. Don't you agree, though, with some sense, though, for his, I mean, he is older, he's 30, but for being the offensive player that he once was and the team that he's still on, he has the ability to make a flip.
I think
I'm not saying it's going to happen.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's going to happen. Obviously, if he doesn't get back to at least like a high 70 points per game season, then
you're in trouble.
Obviously, it should be number one. I mean, it's $10 million a year. It's ridiculous. But I don't count out Sagan not having I wouldn't be surprised if he gets back to where he was. I'd just be like, yeah, I mean, look at what he'd been doing seasons prior to that, and he didn't even have this type of help on those teams when he was doing it. So I think he's able to do it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, of all the guys on this list that have a chance to bounce back, I think Sagan has the best chance to bounce back.
Yeah.
Because of what you mentioned. I mean, there was just so much talent there, and it was a nasty injury. And you just hope that with a little bit less pressure on his shoulders, guys like Hintz and Robertson carrying most of the load, maybe he sees not as tough competition. He can bounce back a little bit and get at least to 70 points, right? That's what you hope for.
Yeah.
By making that much. I think it's just a wait and see, but he could, if he bounces back, Dallas is a really good team, and then that contract doesn't look so bad.
Yeah, for sure. But so,
of all the guys on this list, I think defensemen are way more common than forwards are because of what we talked about, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that there's so few defensemen, so teams are willing to take more and more chances on these guys that show glimpses of something that have obvious holes, and then they just kind of fall apart. And my guy, I think, is the most egregious example of this, that being Seth Jones. Seth Jones is a guy that I think traditional hockey heads love because he was this big body defensively that can move the puck. But I don't think Seth Jones was ever as good as the hype would suggest.
He would always have sparks late in the season. That's what got his attention. I think that's what, when you look at Seth Jones, I mean, even when it was in Columbus, dude, I mean, everybody was like, oh, Seth Jones. He's the guy. He can make a difference. And then you throw him in Chicago and you do it in a time where you bring in a guy like Tyler Johnson from Tampa Bay, who was so successful, and he goes down the drain, and all these other guys, and it just didn't work out.
Right. I mean, that Columbus season, talk about 2017-18, 16 goals and 41 assists in 78 games. I mean, that's genuine offensive production for a defenseman. And with his size, that's easy to get lulled into that. But since that season, he just wasn't a good player. And you can write it off as a COVID year, shortened season, whatever. It wasn't that. He just wasn't that kind of player. And then the Blackhawks trade for him, give him an 8-year extension at $9.5 million annually for a player who wasn't good. And it showed this year how bad Chicago was relying on him to be a reliable defenseman. And he's just not that. And now you have him locked up at $9.5 million for the next 8 years for a team that's rebuilding. I mean, that's such a hamstring. You can't even move that contract when you're moving contracts for good players that are still young, like DeBrincat, like Kirby Dach. I mean, they moved on from these guys because they want a full teardown, and they can't even move on from Seth Jones. That's how bad this is.
I agree 100%.
So for me, that's as bad as it gets.
Yeah, when you factor in, like, obviously there's a reason why Seguin's number 1 on this list because of just the injury and everything else, but Jones's production has just not been remotely close to even have gotten the contract to begin with. At least Seguin had a reason to begin with.
Exactly. That's the
like
real big thing.
the potential is there where, like you guys even talked about. I'm a little wary of it because he had a full season last year where he played 80 games and still wasn't productive, but that could still change. I mean, that's still a possibility. I don't see a world where Jones is valuable to the Blackhawks.
There's
that's
just
fair.
no way
That's
almost.
fair.
I don't see a future where the Blackhawks are going to be good. So
Not for a while.
It's just way down the line.
Yeah.
they'll struggle for years.
Couple
Well,
quick,
I believe that does it for hockey, right?
yeah, just a couple quick thoughts. Nick Suzuki on this list. I don't think he should be on this list. I mean, Nick Suzuki's a good player. I just think that the numbers in Montreal, which is a terrible system, make it look worse than he actually is. I think that contract's fine. And Ben Sherratt, they just signed this year. They're going to regret that right away too.
I almost went with that one, but I didn't.
It'll be so much fun to see these actually play out in the upcoming season. We're not that far away, guys. So good hockey session there. Let's get on to football. And man, guys, we just kind of wrapped up here with the NFL preseason. It's over. Lots of stuff for rookies coming into the league. Some vets that have been going on. And I'll kick us off with just our thoughts before the Bills and Rams play next Thursday, September 8th, and that's dealing with an ex-Bills player, and that's punter Matt Araiza. Obviously got kind of some shocking news, and may not have been shocking to him. We still don't know too much, but he and a couple other ex-teammates from college were accused of gang raping a 17-year-old girl. And, after seeing the whole Deshaun Watson stuff unfolding this entire summer or the past year, it just makes you sick to see these stories come out. He's already made some comments saying he's looking to clear his name and make this really short and sweet. But ultimately, it led to the Bills releasing him. And for a guy that was just thriving in the preseason, a real athletic guy, everybody calling him the punt god and just saying what a likable guy he is. And now this comes up right when he gets the starting job. So obviously there's a lot to be unfolded here as the next couple months and weeks go on, but that was obviously one of the biggest talking points of the preseason.
And I think the thing that I want everyone who's watching now and also just been following this, before you say anything about it to anyone, before you bring it up to anyone, before you make your thoughts known, read what is already out there about this. The same way I think everyone needs to read everything that's come out about Watson before you open your mouth. Read what is coming out because almost regardless to me at this point, just from the things we've heard, it's very likely that he committed some type of crime here. The extent of that crime is yet to be seen. It can get much worse than what we already know about it, but it's very unlikely that something criminal didn't happen in this scenario. And I think that that's why, even though it was a little later than I hoped it would happen, the Bills did make the right decision by just saying, you know what, we're not dealing with this. We can't allow this to be something that distracts us, nor can we employ someone who's in the situation just from what they already know or they should have known. If something changed with that, obviously, I'm sure he'll be given a chance if he's cleared, but I don't see that happening personally from what I've read.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the only resolution that makes sense for both the Bills and the league. They had to take care of this. I think, releasing him was the right thing to do, even if it came probably too late.
Yeah, and it's just a weird day and age nowadays where anything you put out there, it will get blown up. And this is just the new media world that we live in. And, obviously, until more and more information comes out, there is a decision. And what has happened, we will then cover it from there. But just giving that little update. But other than that, guys, we've had 3 weeks of NFL preseason football. Lots of stuff going on, lots of rookies in the mix, especially starting quarterbacks to running backs. And kind of just want to get your guys' opinion. Like, what stuck out to you this preseason? And what is it going to do when it comes time to the actual regular season?
I think the general play of the rookie quarterback class, outside of, Matt Corral did get injured, so he kind of is an exception. But for the most part, the rookies have looked really good, especially for where we expected them to be at. Obviously coming from my side of things here, Pickett was fantastic overall. They asked him to basically be a point guard type of passer, just get the ball out quick, make good decisions. Something that he didn't really do a ton of at Pitt just because he was expected to be such a playmaker for them. I think Pittsburgh really wanted to see him stand in the pocket, make throws from there, make the right decisions, and he did that for them. And I think it'll bode well when he probably eventually gets a chance to see the field this year. Even a guy like Desmond Ridder that I'm not super high on overall had a really nice preseason overall. He had some bad picks, but he's a rookie. I can live with that. The throws he did make were pretty impressive. If he can keep that up, he'll have a shot to compete with Mariota as the season goes on. And like I said, the rest of the quarterback class really looked pretty strong compared to their draft slots in general.
Yeah, Malik Willis is another guy that
yes, fun.
We talked about. That is just so much fun. I'm surprised he fell to the third round, and it looks like Tennessee got a steal there.
Could
and
be
a long-term solution, perhaps, maybe if they decide to move on from Tannehill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, though, as well, to see the teams that were in contention of being in the Super Bowl last year and the players that they bring in and the opportunities they give these young guys to really have a chance of making a roster. Even if you start off as a special teams guy, you're still on a roster to potentially go to the Super Bowl and maybe work your way up into the lineup and take someone's job. You're competing every week, guys, every day. You can lose your job like that. And it's so interesting to see also just like the Kansas City Chiefs have had a lot of movement in their offense in the sense of getting rid of Tyreek Hill. So you wanted to see what these new guys can do in this type of Andy Reid offense. And for me, it's so exciting to see Patrick Mahomes actually get some reps in the preseason. And it seemed like to me he got more than what we were expecting, 100%. But you want to see how he can now rely on a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster and all these other additions they've made and really start to get the game plan going before they hit week one ultimately. So that's been an absolute pleasure for me to watch these contending teams with their new players and, really get to work early in the sense of, hey, guys, we got to master this before we get out there and try and win our conference in the regular season so we can get that week one bye in the playoffs.
Absolutely makes sense. I mean, when there's new pieces coming into any championship contender, there's a whole lot that has to go into planning and playing around with that. And I think the Kansas City example you brought up is a great example because, you lose a Pro Bowler in Tyreek Hill, you replace him with a talented collection of guys, but the dynamic changes, right? You can't rely on this incredible wideout anymore. You have to rely on contributions from Juju here, contributions from Sky Moore here, a little bit of from Green Bay, Marquez Valdes-Scantling on this side. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of guys that come in, and it's more of a group effort. And I think in the preseason, seeing those things work together is really interesting.
Yeah. And I think Mahomes especially, like to me, I think he's going to be a better player long-term because of this move. Because even though he didn't rely on it nearly as much as years past, Hill has been kind of that safety net that's not really a safety net, right? Like he's a guy like, oh, Tyreek's down there somewhere. I'm going to throw the ball to him. And he trusts him to find space and get the ball and score with it more often than not. And we've seen that work so well over the years, but he really was more of an underneath receiver than ever before this past year. I think he had 90 catches behind 10 yards from the scrimmage. Like he was a guy that you can replace those touches. They're not going to be as effective touches, but it's not going to be impossible to replace the production overall. And I think Mahomes is going to be a better player as he navigates that and has to play kind of more, not so much in structure, but more sound, less of the gunslinging mentality. I think it'll help him as he gets older, especially.
I agree. Hey guys, I know we talked about it a little bit, but we got a comment here. Thoughts
Yes.
on Malik Willis from my buddy Logan.
Ah.
Yeah, so realistically, obviously Ryan Tannehill, the starter in Tennessee. Do you see Malik Willis actually getting a chance at all this year, the upcoming season, of playing a game, not because of injury?
This year, it'd be very hard to see because I think Tannehill's still at a point where he's not going to play so badly, especially in the regular season. I don't think that he's going to get benched. Now, if they're out of the playoff race in the last week or two, or again, like obviously you just mentioned without getting injured, but if Tannehill does get injured, one of those things happen, then we might see Willis just to kind of finish things out. But mostly if there's just out of the playoffs. But that's the only scenario I could see him playing because right now he does bring obviously an entirely different skill set than Tannehill, but he doesn't have the consistency that they're going to want, especially with so many different weapons that they're bringing that haven't before. Guys that outside of Robert Woods are very unproven in the receiving core. It would be very hard to ask a rookie to take that challenge on, even with Derrick Henry in the backfield.
Yeah, I agree with Shane here. This year, it seems like a long shot because of how much success they've had with Tannehill over the past few years, and specifically playing through Derrick Henry and playing it safe and doing just the smart play over and over again. And Malik Willis, for all the talent he has, he's not the type really to play it safe. We saw with these long runs, and we saw with all this dynamic offense he brings, it's a completely different attack than what they were using with Tannehill. And so I think they'll stick with Tannehill.
Well, then let me counter you guys with another
Okay.
question here.
Okay.
If Tannehill wasn't on this team, Malik Willis is starting the season, how many wins are they getting to? In my opinion, guys, too, I think he's an awesome athlete. He's a skilled guy. I don't know if he has it, though, in the sense to run an NFL offense consistently get that game plan down weekly. And the reason why I say that, yes, he was flashy in the preseason. He is a smart kid, but just his throwing motion for me at times, it seems like he is the ultimate, okay, let's try and copy Mahomes a little bit. And let's be real, only Mahomes can really make the side baseball passes and really commit to it and having it work out. I don't know if Malik Willis is there. And I think if he were to start this season, if I'm the head coach, Mike Vrabel, I'm telling him to calm down just a little bit in the sense of let's take this as a learning season. We're not trying to go out there. I mean, obviously, they're going to tell you to go out and win. But at the end of the day, I would just be like, okay, let's get your emotions down. Let's not try and do these little sidearm over lob passes, whatever he was doing. I think it was in the second game or maybe the first game. He's got the running ability, but that's not going to be able to sustain him a winning season in the NFL.
I think that if you're asking for a win total, they probably only win like 6 or 7 games because this roster is pretty. I think that one injury to like a Derrick Henry or another, or like a Kevin Byard, one of their best,
and the loss of
players,
AJ Brown. Yeah.
that doesn't. Yeah, again, because Burks, I don't think is ready to play right now, just from what I've seen from him. Like, it would be very hard for them to win more than that. Now, they are in a pretty weak division outside of the Colts, who I think is a good roster, but they are in the AFC. So pretty much they're guaranteed to have a really tough schedule just by being in the AFC. I think Willis would win a few games off of his crazy stuff, but he'd also lose just as many, probably, as a rookie. I think his long-term potential is there because his accuracy when he does hit his reads on time and he's on time with the football is really good, especially even in college, especially down the field. He drops some beautiful balls in there. But again, you kind of mentioned it too, Matt. Like, he does like to do kind of like the off-platform sidearm, different arm angles, and I think his arm strength is perfectly good enough to do that stuff. But doing that now is different than doing it in a year or two whenever he has everything else figured out.
I think also just doing it now after the 4 or 5 years that Mahomes has been changing the game, and NFL defenses, they've accommodated for it now
to a certain degree.
Understand that people do this.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, Sam, you got anything on it?
Well, I think our excitement about Malik Willis comes from the fact that he's had these great flashes in a preseason game with no stakes. And the fact that he's in a great system where he can wait behind someone like Tannehill and learn from someone like Tannehill and have a redshirt year. But for this year, I mean, I don't think he's ready yet, like you said. And so to predict that they would be a above 500 team with Willis as a starter, I think that's a bit of a stretch. So 6 or 7
I agree.
About right.
All right. Well, might as well reply to the comments there, but let's get into the next topic. And we've had the NFL top 20 players of the 2022 season voted by the peers of the NFL. And this is one of the worst lists I've seen in 10 years. I'm not biased. I'm not biased at all. But let's just throw that out there. But Josh Allen's at 13. That's a disgrace. And I will explain to you why it's a disgrace. Let's just do a little playoff statistics. Why don't we? Josh Allen had a passer rating of 149. He had 637 yards, 9 touchdowns in 2 games, 0 interceptions whatsoever. Now we look at the number 3 player overall, Aaron Rodgers. He was in 1 game, guys. He didn't have a touchdown at all. Didn't have an interception because we know he doesn't throw interceptions. But he couldn't beat the 49ers at his own territory. Like, okay, that's number 3 guy versus the guy who had basically the perfect playoff performance. And you look at Tampa Bay, number 1 player, Tom Brady. I mean, how are you going to take that away from him? So the GOAT, right? He only had 2 or 3, I think 3 total touchdown passes, 1 interception. Obviously throws for a bunch of yards because that was his great year last year. But yeah, still not as great as Josh Allen. And right behind Josh Allen is Patrick Mahomes in the sense of playoff performance. Now, he did better than Allen in the rankings, but still not top 4. So I'm shaking my head at the list. I don't know how they came up with the fact that Josh Allen's outside the top 10 and Patrick Mahomes is not in the top 4.
I do want to stress this, and I'm just going to make this known because it'll make sense as to why I feel certain ways about certain positions on this list. This is not a playoff performance ranking. This is a full season playoffs ranking. Do I think Allen could be higher on this list based on how well he ended the season, especially? Sure. Did I think he had a worse season last year than the year before? Yes. So, if we're talking about just overall performance, I think he did. Now, he still was fantastic, and he's Josh Allen, and he does crazy crap, and the playoffs were immaculate for him, especially against the Patriots, but also against the Chiefs. But I do think that it makes more sense when you look at this list, obviously, more from a regular season perspective, not completely throwing playoffs out. But when players are looking at this list, from what I understand,
listen,
really
I'll say this, though. If you're going to throw in videos for each highlight and you got a guy in Aaron Donald at number 2 and you're showing highlights of him winning the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah, I get it. But, like, you get what I'm saying, though. Like, it's not supposed to be just – I think, honestly, I would have had Allen lower than 13 if you didn't have the playoffs included this year specifically. I could make that argument. I wouldn't really fight anyone if they had him this high without even the playoffs, but I would be more willing to move him down than up if it weren't for the playoff performance. To me.
I don't know if I lost you there, Shane. Are we losing him?
Oh, you good?
Yeah, we're back. Are we back?
Can you hear me? Okay, good.
Okay, I can hear you now. All right, we're good.
Cool.
We're good.
All right. Yeah, so that's my thing with it. Now, in general, Brady being 1 is something that I just truly don't understand because 1, he didn't win the MVP, and he's not the highest ranked quarterback. Rodgers won the MVP. If we're making it mostly a regular season award, which is what I kind of think this is, then Rodgers would be 1 in this scenario. Or you could just give it to Donald because he's the best player regardless of position. I'm fine with that too. Giving Brady 1 kind of just feels like, oh, he's coming back. He didn't retire. Let's give him number 1.
Well, I mean, also, let's remember Brady had an 11-yard rush this year. So
yes, that's impressive. For
moving on up those rankings.
Right.
I mean, insane, guys, compared to a guy like Josh who will hurdle multiple
right, literally hurdle players,
season in a game that doesn't matter. So
yeah, so
no.
The list was just
I mean, I don't know. Besides the quarterbacks, though, you look at the list and to me, there's just so many guys that are on here that, especially in the top 11 through 20, where I'm like, okay, maybe should have been bumped to the top 10 or shouldn't even be in the list whatsoever. It's so interesting in the sense of how they come up with the list. And remember, it's all voted by the peers. It's almost to me, it's a popularity contest. I would say for the majority of it. To me, also a guy in Trent Williams. I mean, that guy should have
He
been.
has to be top 10. He has to.
He has to be top
That
10.
that that's one of my
100%.
biggest.
Yeah,
That was one of my
100%.
biggest snubs for sure. And that was the
100%.
thing that again, it's an offensive lineman. They don't get as much
Yeah,
love.
but the fact
as,
that you see so much from this guy and how
his
he
highlights
impacts
are
the game,
hilarious for a lineman. It's insane.
it's insane. It's
Oh my
insane.
gosh. You can make a
But
whole 20-minute highlight reel of just his blocks from this year, just him destroying people.
the thing
on
is,
poles
nobody
and-
else in that position has come close to the absolute energy he brings in and the execution that he does each and every Sunday. To me, he's a top 8 player easily.
He should be for sure. And the guy that I'm most upset about, honestly, and this is kind of coming. We got some Falcons guys and around the block. I want to talk about a player, AJ Terrell. He was a top 20 player in the NFL last year. He was the second best corner at worst behind Ramsey, if you want to give Ramsey, because of how many different things he does for the Rams and size, all that stuff. Terrell was the best cover corner straight up in the NFL last year. And the fact that a guy like Diggs, as good as he was from interception standpoint, other things, is so high on this list and Terrell's not even on it, frustrates me greatly because the players, especially receivers that he played against, they have to know how good he is, and they still didn't put him on the list. That bothers me a whole lot. I wanted to make sure I say that one especially.
That's 100% fair.
Crazy.
You got anything, Sam, here list-wise?
Well, I think it's tough to discuss this list as a whole because these are all great players in their own right. It's just a matter of placement on this list,
Yeah.
right? Because we're talking about great players and you don't want to disparage anyone. But I think, what has Micah Parsons done to be the 16th best player on this list?
Even as a rookie, as good as he was,
He's a
it's very
great
high.
rookie. He's an awesome rookie.
It's very high. I will say that.
So high. I mean, he was great. He impacted the Cowboys in so many ways. He really brought a nice pass rush presence. But come on, I mean, there's so many better players. There's not just 15 better players. There's way more better players. So that, for me, I think is the biggest jump of all these guys.
I agree with that 100%. Thanks for the intake on this, guys. Obviously, each and every year, people are frustrated about it, and but some years they do get it right. I think they had it right last year, at least making Donald number 1.
Any
He
year
should
he's
al-
number one. It's
at
fine.
least exactly. So I mean, you always have your case for guys that should be ranked high in the top 10, and you're like, okay, they should at least make the top 10. If they're 10 exactly, I'm not going to be upset about it. But it's a conversation we have every year. That being said, let's get actually out of the NFL and let's get into college football. We're officially back here, guys. Week 0 was this past week, but now we get to week 1. And we've got 3 games of ranked teams, some awesome matchups. And we're going to start off with a pretty decent matchup in Cincinnati versus Arkansas. Obviously, Cincinnati had a miracle season, in my opinion, of advancing to the college football playoff and then absolutely getting murdered.
As we all expect.
I'm saying it short and sweet. It's just how it is.
Yeah.
And this game right here, it's Arkansas all the way, guys. I mean, let's
I'm
be
going
real. All the
Arkansas.
players that they lost from Cincinnati, they don't have the recruitment path of a Arkansas team, especially an SEC team. So at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter in my book, especially week 1. I think Arkansas will be ready to go. They always have bigger players because of where they're located and what football means down there for them. Not trying to diss Cincinnati by any means, but it's just they had their dream season last year, guys. I don't think they're ready to compete. And I do like what Arkansas had done last season, being a mid-pack team in their conference. But going forward into this week 1 matchup, I got Arkansas winning big by double digits.
I think Arkansas definitely is the better team. I actually think they're going to probably win 10 plus games this year in the SEC. I think they're very, very talented. I really like their quarterback, KJ Jefferson, what he showed last year. They don't have Burks. Obviously, he was a great player in college, but they are going to be able to make offense still without him. He was really more of a guy that was after the catch. They're going to have guys who are better route runners, guys who can win down the field more consistently than him. So I'm not really worried about that at all with them. Cincinnati, you said it kind of best. They had a miracle run last year. They totally earned their spot. I'm not going to try to sit here and say, oh, they should have
100%
never,
spot.
shouldn't
Yeah.
have been there. But we kind of knew that it was very likely if they drew, one of the SEC powerhouses, whether it was Georgia or Bama, it probably wasn't going to go their way. And we saw that last year. And now they have much less talent on that team. They lost most of their high-end talent to the NFL for good reason. It's just going to be hard to beat even a mid-level SEC team, and I think Arkansas is better than that.
Yeah, you guys are right. It's Arkansas. I'm just curious to see how much noise they can make in the SEC because obviously we have a tough conference.
Bama, Georgia, maybe Kentucky too. We'll see, but
I do like this team. And I'm sort of curious to see if we get another great SEC team this year.
Yeah, it's for me going to an SEC school firsthand and seeing all these games live. I mean, it is just a different animal down here, guys. They just do so much better, and they have consistent recruiting in the sense of getting really high star level guys, and they're just so big. I mean, obviously, I went to Tennessee. I got to see Bama come play in Knoxville once every 3 years, and we get smoked.
I'm sorry.
Right? I know. Hey, this is our year, though. This is
all
our
right.
year.
Hey, it's always Tennessee. I mean, I like Tennessee. They
but no, you would literally look at an SEC team in Tennessee, and then you see them against Bama. Their lines are just that much bigger, guys. But you look at the SEC compared to some other conferences, and you're like, well, they should be one of the top teams in the nation. But obviously they have to go through some teams like Alabama and Georgia. But yeah, I mean, if you look at this matchup right now, Arkansas has it 100%. Their quarterback's too good, in my opinion, and I don't think they'll make the mistakes week one like most college football teams do.
Yep.
All righty, let's get on. We got two more here, and we've got Oregon at Georgia. Another SEC team here, number 11 Georgia, number 11 Oregon, number 3 Georgia. Kind of like I was just talking about. I mean, I think the SEC is going to win this one again, guys. I mean, obviously lost a couple players defensively in the draft and some other good talent from last year when they won the national championship. But at the end of the day, they got their quarterback returning, Stetson Bennett, who may not be the biggest guy and the most, or at least seem like the most athletic guy. But, I mean, he's just in that solid program, and he's won a national championship. He understands what it means to be a Georgia Bulldog going forward. I think them at number 3 is kind of ridiculous to start the season. But let's be real, guys. I think this is going to be another bloodbath.
I look at Georgia, right? And we talked about, and you already mentioned how many of their players got drafted last year just from the defense, let alone a couple guys on offense. They still have elite NFL talent all across the defensive line, especially. Linebacker might be a little bit more of a question mark, but they're just probably going to actually let their defensive linemen control the pass rush opposed to their linebackers last year. That was what was so interesting about them is their linebackers, even though they weren't rush linebackers, were still the pass rushers because they would just destroy the front line and let guys run free. And they're going to be able to do it just differently this year. They have a great secondary still. Bennett isn't spectacular, but they're going to be able to put up points on offense enough where their defense isn't going to have to feel too much pressure. And I've always been a fan of Oregon for the most part. I really like what they do. I assume Bo Nix is going to be starting this game for them, the quarterback.
I think
he's not going to beat Georgia.
No, he won't.
He's not.
He'll make it entertaining for like a half.
Yeah, he'll run around and do some weird stuff. As soon as
the second half starts, even if he starts with the ball and they're up, they'll find a way.
It's just there's no. I'm sorry, he's not. I mean, he might do really well outside of that because he's going to be in the Pac-12 and all the scrutiny with that conference right now. If he beats Georgia week 1, I won't even say anything bad about him ever again. But I just don't see that.
Let's all make the pact right now. If Bo Nix beats
Georgia, he could be terrible the rest of the year. I'm gonna be like, it's not his fault. It's Oregon's bad. That's what's gonna. It's because that's what's gonna take. He's gonna have to be spectacular for them to have a chance.
We know Bo Nix from his time at Auburn. He definitely loves to take those chances. He's like a little bit of Baker Mayfield mixed with Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, if neither of them were good.
If neither of them were good, that's the thing.
To me, I look at Bo Nix, dude, and every time I see him on the field, I would literally love to nickname him the Spaz because I feel like he doesn't understand his body. No, seriously.
No, I get you.
Move in the pocket. And it's like his head's telling him to go right, but he goes left. and like he just doesn't understand what's going on.
So
half
awkward,
the time.
such an
But
awkward
then
player.
for some reason it'll work out. You'll have
Yeah, it works out more than it should.
and
Yeah.
you're just like,
All right. Yeah.
that's
Well, that works.
effing Bo Nix out
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
Made
Oh,
every year in the Pac-12, but against an SEC team like Georgia.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Brother.
let's get in. Anything else on this matchup?
Not really.
No, nothing much. All right, let's get into the matchup that's labeled as a close matchup as of right now. We got number 5 Notre Dame. Number
Ooh.
5 Notre Dame. Let's take that in against number 2 Ohio State. Why is Notre Dame number 5?
We do this every year with Notre Dame. They're always
Okay.
started off way too
Who
high.
do they play each year? What, 3 games that matter all year for them? I mean, come on, guys. Like pick it up and move to a different conference, or don't be an independent anymore. Like let's move it on by now.
Ohio State, I think, is favored by 17 right now.
It should be like 25, 24.
Right. So, like, I just want to put in perspective, like, yeah, Ohio State's the number 2 team in the country. They were fantastic last year. Stroud's coming off of a fantastic season and probably going to have a better one, in my opinion, because the receiving talent is still
He'll be the
just as
favorite for
good.
the Heisman too.
Right.
most
Like,
definitely.
he's going to be probably a top 5 pick if he plays even better than last year. And the fact that Notre Dame is only 3 spots lower in the rankings, but is still being, underdog by 17 points in most areas, that's all I have to say about this. Ohio State is a different program than Notre Dame is right now. I think what Notre Dame's doing without Kelly there now and the recruiting that they've been doing, I think that they're going to be more of a player in the next 2, 3, 4 years than they have been for this kind of stretch with Kelly. But it doesn't start right now. It's not going to happen this year, I don't think. They're probably going to be somewhere in like the top 10 at the end of the year because they're going to lose this game and maybe like one other one.
Exactly. Well, that's
it.
I was going to get to it. What I'm going to say when they lose. If you want me to say if, I'll say it. But if Notre Dame loses, how far do they drop? I mean, this is just the way to me that they set this up with the whole rankings thing. You're putting number 5 on Notre Dame, and if they lose to Ohio State, who's number 2, week 1, then it's like, hey, they're still going to be in the top 25, and they will be for the rest of the season because they don't play anybody.
They might still be in the top 10.
Exactly.
They might be, honestly. Because, they lost with number 2, so that's not
even
like...
if they lose by 20 points, they will still probably be in the top 10.
They could, yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. So, and, Ohio State is such a historic football program, guys.
Machine.
They're always ready to go. They have their couple rivalry games with obviously Michigan and a couple other teams here and there, but they're always going to be the powerhouse guys going forward. I don't see them losing week 1.
No, they're probably not going to lose. But what's fun about Ohio State is when they have a genuine NFL prospect at quarterback. I mean, I loved watching them with Justin Fields and Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace.
Mm-hmm.
But those guys, when they're on Ohio State, they're just so much fun because they just have so much dynamic offense against these teams.
Some of the quarterbacks there, I mean, let's not forget about Cardell Jones.
Cardell Jones.
National championship, guys.
A.T.
And
Bird also.
I'm pretty sure he, what was that thing that went around that he, destroyed a kid in the hospital in Madden or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
90-something points, and everybody's like, this is great. Great. Oh my gosh, they get some real beauties out of Ohio State. I'll say that
for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, all right. So realistically, if Notre Dame loses by 10 points, where do they fall to?
I think 9. Probably somewhere around 9.
Is there
maybe
a chance
10? But
is there a chance that they get out of the top 20 after week 1?
They'd have to lose by 40. Because they're going to keep them
24.
To me, it's just they always give Notre Dame the benefit of the doubt because they're probably going to win 11 games, and they assume that going into the year because they look at their schedule yeah, that's 11 wins, and it's Notre Dame, so we'll give them because they start them off at number 5. That's strategic, I feel like, because they're like they're going to lose probably their biggest game, so we only want them to drop by 4 or 5 spots. So I think if they get absolutely plastered in every way possible, they just get dismantled, they can't score off on offense, their defense can't stop anything. Maybe you see them drop into the late teens, mid-teens, but I think that's the farthest they'll drop.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, I think that's going to cover it for football here. Really good topics there. Now that college football is back, we'll have plenty of coverage on that as we get into the better weeks after, I think, the first 2 weeks. Usually the first two are pretty short and sweet. But let's break it on over to baseball, guys. We got baseball finally. It's been freaking weeks, months.
It's been a while, to say the least. And
But
I don't want to sit here and try to catch up in any way. I'm kind of past that. But there
if
is something.
so, we've got at least a 20.
Juan Soto got traded, guys.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not even going to talk. The Padres don't. I know you're going to talk about them, Sam. I don't want to even think about the Padres right now. They upset me so much. They upset me so much. But we do have to talk about a player that didn't get traded, but is going to probably be on the team he's on right now for maybe the better part of a decade and a half, and that'd be Julio Rodriguez, who was signed, and even though it's his rookie season, to what is right now essentially a 12-year deal max that can also be added on to at the end of the contract, which that's what I want to talk about specifically.
You say it's a 12-year deal, but you were explaining it to us a little bit more in depth. So why don't you go ahead and do that?
So there's a base deal and then a bunch of other wild ways that he can get paid a bunch of money, right? Let me start with just the base deal. So it starts technically this year moving forward. It's an 8-year deal that is going to be $120 million base. That's just, he's going to get that no matter what. $15 million average over the first 8 years of his deal. Fantastic for a player that's only 21 years old right now. So as of 22 right now, one WAR equals basically about $8.5 million added to his contract moving forward. So WAR, for those who aren't familiar, basically it's just a way of adding your value or adding up your total contributions to your team. Anything above 0 is better. Obviously, anything below 0 is really bad. Higher the better. Most guys top out about 5 or 6 in a really good season. So think of $8+ million being added every time he's getting up higher in those rankings. Now after 2028, that's when the base deal will technically be over. Then he's going to be having a club option that will kick in, and how that determined, like money that's determined there, is going to be based on his performance. So he's kind of betting on himself, and the team is betting on him to say, hey, we're going to sign you now, and you're not going to make crazy money compared to like the top players in baseball are making, whenever they're in their 30s, but you'll have the potential to make that. So his performance dependent is going to be an extra 8 years, and it's going to be $200 million possibly. That's going to all add up to basically how you guys want to think about it is it could end up working out. And I want to just bring it up all right here for you. It could top out over $450 million. That's how much he can make over the next roughly 17 years total. That's how much this contract could reach. Now, for him to do all that, I couldn't even explain all the different metrics he has to hit. Basically, if he's an MVP player more than once, if he's an all-star consistently, if he's hitting certain benchmarks statistically, it's going to all add up to basically being maybe the biggest deal in the history of baseball when it's all said and done.
Sam, you got anything, buddy?
Well, I just love the idea of this more than the execution itself, because
it's complicated, but
it's obviously very complicated. But
really, the guy writing this thing up.
Oh, jeez. They must have paid the lawyer probably half the contract value just to sit there and write it, because they're like, well, what if he sneezes on this day in April 20? Like that's what it feels like, because I tried to read through it.
$1 million.
Tried to read through it, and I'm like, yeah, he's basically good for him. He's going to be a millionaire. Awesome. That's basically what it is.
He's rich now.
Sam. Yeah,
so I think it's good for Seattle that they're able to find a way to incentivize these young stars to stay in a small market like Seattle long term, right? I think that's the real benefit, that they don't really risk losing him to a New York or the LA Dodgers the way the Red Sox did with Mookie Betts, essentially.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it's really interesting the way what this opens up, that we can have these contracts that protect the team somewhat, but also incentivize the players to stay where they are and continue to make loads and loads of money for years on end by doing better. So I think that's sort of an interesting middle ground for what the future of these contracts in all sports could be.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how this contract unveils itself over the next 12 years. And really exciting to watch.
We're gonna have to take a long look at it after the first 8 years, especially, is when we'll have to start looking at and go, okay, what has he done? what options kick in, how much is he making this year. But I think what's really interesting about this, and I wanted to talk about what the Braves have been doing for a while, where they've kind of been the ones that have started this off with deals like Acuna, and they did something similar with their rookie this year, Michael Harris. They signed him to a long-term contract as well. They kind of started this idea of, we're going to pay these players when they're very young. We're going to give them upfront money, and it's going to save us long-term money most likely, and hedge our bets that if they don't end up being the players that they are right now long-term, we're still going to not be completely screwed money-wise. We're not going to have to like end up with like a Bonilla situation like the Mets have right now, where you're deferring money for a million years.
2035 he's getting paid.
Exactly. Yeah. Like they wanted to avoid that type of thing. Right. So instead of paying guys who are 30, 10 years, $400 million, let's pay a guy who's 22 for 12 years. You know, he'll be with us for most of his prime, with the potential for him to make a ton of money if he earns it. Right. And I think especially for younger players who otherwise in baseball, you have to kind of earn, you know, your way through the majors for quite some time to even have a chance to make any real money. This gives them the opportunity to make money now, have that money to invest, to do different things with it. And it works out really for, I think, both sides. And even with Tatis, they kind of did the same thing. Now, obviously, that's kind of iffy right now, but they bet on him and said, hey, you know, we've only seen 100+ games of you, but you've been unbelievable. Here's a gigantic extension that is, you know, determined by how you play and what you do moving forward. So,
alrighty. Well, good things to talk about as always. And let's get on over to our last little baseball topic, which is a pretty big topic.
It is, yeah.
It's what teams are we watching for in this last month of baseball before the playoffs start. I'll start off with two that are just kind of obvious ones. It's first off the New York Yankees. I didn't want to be on this segment, but man, they just really.
Yeah, the last time
really got like the thing is though is like obviously they're still so far ahead in their division.
Oh yeah,
they're gonna win their division. Yeah. I don't have any doubts about that in my mind. It's just for where they were, and they haven't found anything yet to get back in a sense of a consistent winning over a 10-game span. I believe in their last 10 games they're 5-5 right now, so it's a lot better than what they've been doing. But my goodness, I had never seen such a tumble. At least for being so high for a pretty good chunk of the season, right before All-Star break. I'm familiar with how that worked out. I believe they started to go down as soon as they got back from the break.
Pretty much, yeah.
So that's a team I'd definitely be looking for, especially the last like 3 series, because you really want to see them getting momentum before they go into playoffs. Because if they don't figure something out, at least get that feel-good thing going for them again, you never really know what can happen in the playoffs. So obviously I'd be watching them, see what they can do to start changing around their program. Shane, you got any insight for us on what is going on with the Yankees?
I think it's super interesting because the last time we were able to do shows of baseball, one of the topics was how they were on that historic pace, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that I jinxed them or anything because I already did that.
Well, I was against it too. I was against it. I was like, it ain't gonna last, but I didn't think it would be this bad.
That's the problem. Is like they might not win 100 games now. That's very possible. I think that they will probably, especially if they keep up what they kind of have had going recently. Now that they got out of that funk that they were in, I think they lost 20 of 29 games at one point.
Yeah,
like that's not going to hold. They're way too talented for that. But it does beg the question now: like, are they a team that you trust going into the playoffs? Depending on how the rest of the season unfolds.
And it's so interesting because if you even if you look at their wins that they've had since their downfall, the scoring is so down. The runs are down tremendously, and that is so scary to have going into the playoffs. Their losses, wins, no matter what it is, they can't get runs in right now, and it seems like they're really struggling. And as a fan right now, I just need to see some consistency. Even if you're losing games, at least get some runs in before you head into the playoffs. But they do need to turn it around.
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious what the problem is. They traded Joey Gallo.
Right. Yeah.
That was needed, though. I think it was needed. No?
No,
it was. I think Joey Gallo definitely needed it. For sure. Needed it. He definitely needed it. But the Yankees did too. But
they got him. The Dodgers haven't lost.
The Dodgers are Yeah, they're certain. They've taken over the Yankees mojo basically. I feel like they
Yeah.
just swapped. They just like, let's go back to New York area to steal their mojo and take it
Yeah.
back with us.
Well, Joey Gallo, that's how it happened.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
But
I'm feeling that,
honestly,
that's for sure.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
no, the Yankees will be fine. I mean, the problem just being if you're in a funk when you enter the playoffs, it can just be over so quickly that
Yeah.
you got to figure it out in this last month before
Yeah.
that.
For sure.
And then the last team I'm going to mention right now, because they're kind of in the mid of the wild card hunt, is the San Diego Padres. Obviously, just need to sustain where they're at right now, but obviously you can't get too comfortable because I think they got the Brewers right behind them. So I think it's the Brewers at least.
In the wild card race, I think they're right in that range.
Yeah, that's like the Giants or something like that. But yeah, so I mean, they don't have a comfortable lead, but they're one of the remaining teams. And, for a organization that would just like to see some baseball and stuff, they just need to get a couple more series under their belt. I think do a little bit better job with their mound management. And so those are my two teams, guys, I got there. Keep your eyes on them. I think they'll be pretty interesting to watch in the home stretch of the season.
Yeah, something about the Padres I want to touch on before.
All right, let's ride it, man.
Yeah,
Let's ride.
Let's ride. Broncos country, right?
Oh my god, yeah.
About the Padres, it's just they just have so much talent. Like those big three of Machado, Tatis, and now Juan Soto, right? That's a three in the lineup that can get you very far just by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously this year is not that year because of the Tatis suspension and whatnot. But if you can get some sort of momentum, I don't think they're going to win a World Series. You're not going to get anywhere close, I don't think. But if you can have just some positive feeling going into next year, win around, maybe upset a team, and then you're taking that momentum and bringing back Fernando Tatis to that lineup, like you're in a very good position going forward. So I think for them, this may not seem like an important year, but I think it's an important year in the sense that going into next year when they have an actual chance to win, they need to set the tone now.
I think for them, it is more important, less about where you end up this year, but how you feel going into the offseason, right? And that's kind of where you bring in Tatis, if he can come back both healthy and not roided up or whatever his situation exactly ended up being. He just needs to play a full season. That's something we have yet to see from Tatis. If he can play a full season and be even 90% of the guy that we've seen when he has played, and Machado's there, and you get Juan Soto, who's going to be consistently great. We know this. They're going to be a tough team to beat, even with the Dodgers in their division, because the pitching is going to be, I think, better next year. I really like Musgrove in their rotation, especially. Like, he's been fantastic. But I do think there is an interesting scenario where if they do end up losing out to Milwaukee, after they traded for Hader from them, and then he gives up 1 billion runs in like 4 innings. I think his ERA with them is like 40 something. No joke. Like, it's ridiculous.
Wow.
That would be very poetic, I think, for the Brewers, for them to leapfrog them after making that trade with them. But that I'm looking forward to seeing if that ends up happening or not. I still give the edge to San Diego so far, but that'd be very funny if that happens. So.
Yep.
But for me, I think the team that I want to look at, and it's more of a storyline situation and less about me really thinking that there's some great team or anything like that, is St. Louis. Because I just would love, even though I'm a Pirates fan, I respect the rest of my division, especially mostly because what else am I going to do? Am I going to root for the Pirates right now? I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to let them do their thing. O'Neal Cruz, woo, hit the ball hard. That's like pretty much all I had to look forward to every day, is like seeing if he breaks the Statcast record for throwing a ball in the infield or hitting a ball 1,000,000 miles an hour. But so looking at St. Louis, though, like if they can give Pujols, who's had a crazy second half of the season, by the way, since the All-Star break, dude's hitting the ball better than he has since like he was last in St. Louis. You have Wainwright and you have Molina going out here. Can they really challenge for a World Series title and send those guys out with a World Series? That would probably be the best, like just looking at it from a storyline perspective, the best outcome for like ratings and just people being interested in the World Series. If they make it, even if they just make it, the ratings are going to be crazy, especially if Pujols does anything in the World Series, or, if Wainwright wins a game as a start, like any of that happens. I think that'd be a big thing for both baseball and just for St. Louis in general, which I think would be fun.
Yeah, it's a great storyline. Certainly better than the Dodgers repeat.
Exactly. If the Dodgers, if that happened, I'm going to be like, good for them. They're awesome. They should win it. If they don't, that's a failure. That's pretty much what it is with them.
Pretty much.
Like, so that would be the most fun. I think that'd be the most fun storyline is if they can make it very far. So
yeah, it would be excellent. I mean, the late career resurgence for Albert Pujols has been just so enjoyable.
That home run derby, man. If he, instead of it hurting him like most players get hurt by that, he just was like, "Oh, now I can crank more homers. Let's go."
I mean, he's different. We knew this.
So yeah.
Oh man. Well, I'm happy we were able to do it, guys. Talk about baseball finally. It's been forever.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else though going on in the league that you guys want to just mention real quick, or anything catching your eye at all? Even though because we haven't talked about it forever.
Yeah, I know. Arizona does have their top prospect, Corbin Carroll, coming up for the rest of the season. So they're interesting because they haven't been as bad as I really thought they would be this year, even though they did kind of slow down after all the teams in that division were looking pretty good for a while. But that would be interesting to see because they have a lot of guys that are interesting to me in their farm system, see if some of them could come up and make a difference. So
definitely.
Cool. Well, guys, that's going to wrap it up for our show today. Quick one. Obviously, we had some guys out, so thank you to Shane and Sam for staying with it the full hour, 20-something minutes we have going on here. But we'll be back next Monday with a even better show. We'll have some football results. We'll be checking in on where these baseball series are heading to. And also hockey, we'll come up with some more stuff. I believe next week we have the top 5 hits of all time in the NHL. So it's going to be really interesting to see what we come up with. Guarantee you there are going to be some good ones, though. But that's going to do it for us today. Thank you guys for joining. And in the great words of my friend Ben here, I'm going to lead it off with Go Bills, everybody. Go Bills.
Go Bills.